All right, so you send over this really interesting set of materials for us to take a look at. And wow, it's a pretty incredible story. It's like this intricate web of love and loss spanning multiple generations, all centered around this family, the Stantons, and the people in their lives.
Yeah, it really does make you think about how these stories connect.
We're talking like intimate conversations, letters, personal reflections, all these little glimpses into their lives. And it's our job to sort of unpack it all and see what we can learn.
Exactly. In this deep dive, we want to really try to illuminate the key relationships at play here, and the big challenges these people face. And there's also this underlying theme of creativity that runs through it all. That's something I find really fascinating. We want to give you a good sense of what's important without going into like every single detail.
Right. So we should probably start with Georgia Stanton. When we first meet her, she's recently divorced, recién divorciada.
Hmm.
She's dealing with this separation. And at the same time, there's this really strong connection to her great-grandmother, Scarlett Stanton,
Oh, yes, Scar.
a respected, pretty famous romance novelist.
I've heard of her.
And then you have George's mother, Ava Stanton, who is also kind of caught up in what's happening with Scarlett's unfinished manuscript.
Mm.
And then into this already kind of complicated situation, we have two more characters entering the picture.
Okay.
Noah Harrison, also a novelist, and Adam, Scarlett's publisher. They show up at George's house in Poplar Grove, Colorado.
Poplar Grove, that sounds familiar.
And right away, Georgia gets this not-so-great impression of Noah. She kind of sees him as this know-it-all, this sábelo todo presuntuoso especializado en el sadismo emocional, which basically means he's full of himself and likes to mess with people's emotions.
Right, I can see how that would create some tension.
And that setting, Poplar Grove, it's not just a random location. It feels important, like it's connected to this idea of legacy that we were talking about.
I agree. Setting can definitely add another layer to the story.
Okay, so let's talk about the unfinished manuscript. This is a big deal, right?
It seems to be.
Because it's causing a lot of conflict. Scarlett left this story unfinished, and even though Georgia doesn't like Noah's writing at all, she's the one who gets to decide if he can finish it.
Wow, that's a lot of power.
There's a big contrast, too, between their writing styles. Noah's stuff is described as dolorosa y depresiva, disfrazada de historia de amor. Basically, painful and depressing, disguised as a love story.
Heavy stuff.
Whereas Scarlett was known for her happier endings.
So they have different views on how a story should end.
Totally different. Knows all about those happy endings. He wants everything to be todo corazones y arcoiris, all hearts and rainbows. But Georgia feels like that wouldn't be right for the story. And get this, there's actually a clause in the contract that gives Georgia final approval.
Really? So she has the ultimate say. That's interesting. It makes you think about how art can be interpreted differently across generations, right? Like, is the author's original intent more important, or does the work take on new meaning as time passes and different people engage with it?
That's a great point. And to complicate things even further, Ava, Georgia's mother, is really pushing for the book to be finished. And we soon find out why.
Okay.
She's having some serious money problems. She says, Tim me ha abandonado. Estoy en la bancarrota. Kim left her, and she's broke.
Oh, wow. So there's a lot at stake here.
Yeah, it's a reminder of how these personal and financial pressures can influence artistic decisions. And Georgia, well, she's always had a complicated relationship with her mother, always trying to please her.
It sounds like a difficult situation.
And to make matters worse, Ava's also trying to negotiate film rights for the book, which Georgia is totally against because she knows Scarlett hated the idea of adaptations.
That adds a whole other layer of complexity to the story. On one hand, you have the artistic integrity of Scarlett's work, and on the other hand, you have the very real financial needs of her family. It really highlights the tension between art and commerce. And then there's Georgia, stuck in the middle, trying to honor her great-grandmother's legacy while also dealing with her mother's expectations. It's a tough spot to be in.
For sure. Okay, so now let's dive into the story within the story.
The manuscript.
Exactly.
Okay.
We're transported back to England during World War II. And we meet Scarlett Stanton, but this time she's a pilot in the Air Transport Auxiliary. We also meet Jameson, an American pilot who's flying with the British.
A wartime romance, huh?
Yeah, and right from their first encounter, there are sparks. Jameson is totally smitten with Scarlett and tries to win her over, invites her to dinner, even manages to find food for her despite all the rationing going on because of the war.
That's pretty impressive. It really shows his dedication.
Right. And their relationship develops against this backdrop of war, with all its dangers.
Yeah.
Jameson is even risking his American citizenship by fighting for the British. They write letters to each other, these really heartfelt letters that reveal how much they care about each other and how painful it is to be apart.
It's fascinating how war can create these incredibly intense connections. The shared danger, the uncertainty of the future, it all contributes to a sense of urgency and deepens the emotional bond. And those letters, being primary sources within the narrative, give us a direct window into their feelings and the realities of their lives during that time.
It's like getting a first-hand account of history.
Exactly. And it adds so much depth to the story.
We also learn about Scarlett's sister, Constance, and her love for a man named Edward. Sadly, Edward dies in a bombing, and we see Scarlett supporting Constance through her grief. It's a stark reminder of the devastating impact of war on everyday lives and the importance of family in times of crisis.
Constance's story shows how the effects of war ripple outward, reaching beyond those who are directly fighting, and it highlights how crucial those family support systems were in coping with loss and trauma.
Absolutely. So back to Scarlett and Jameson. Their relationship continues to develop in the manuscript, and things get pretty serious pretty quickly. Jameson even proposes marriage.
Wow, that escalated fast.
Well, wartime romances often move at an accelerated pace, but it feels genuine. It's not just the circumstances, it's the depth of their connection that drives them towards commitment.
I could see that.
But of course, they still face all these obstacles, not only the war, but also societal expectations, who knows what else. But they do end up getting married and having a son, William.
Yeah.
But even with all that happiness, there's always this underlying anxiety about the future, this sense of fragility, because the war is still going on. It makes you appreciate how precious those moments of joy are in the midst of such uncertainty.
It's a bittersweet kind of happiness.
Okay, so let's come back to the present. Georgia and Noah, how's it going for them?
Right. What's the status of their relationship?
Well, remember how she couldn't stand him at first?
Yeah.
Things are starting to change. That initial antagonism is starting to fade, and something more complex is developing.
Yeah, do tell.
There's definitely an attraction there. They spend time together going through Scarlett's old things like photo albums and even Halloween decorations.
Halloween decorations, that's kind of random.
Yeah, but it's those shared moments that create connection, right?
Yeah.
They even go rock climbing together.
Rock climbing, that's interesting.
Yeah, putting themselves out there, being vulnerable. And those letters between Scarlett and Jameson actually become a point of connection for Georgia and Noah. They talk about them, share their thoughts and feelings. And even Georgia's friend, Hazel, notices that there's something going on. She straight up says to Georgia, "You like him."
So the friend confirms it. It's classic, but it works. That gradual shift in George's perception of Noah feels very natural. Starting from that initial dislike to a more nuanced understanding of who he is. And the rock climbing, well, that adds this element of physical challenge and vulnerability, which often can deepen a connection. And Hazel's observation adds that external perspective, confirming what might be brewing beneath the surface.
Yeah, it's almost as if Scarlett's story is influencing George's present, shaping the potential for a new love story.
It really highlights how the past can have a profound impact on the present.
Okay, but then comes a major turning point. Georgia finds out that Noah has actually finished both endings to the manuscript.
Oh, that's a curveball.
Yeah, and it triggers this feeling of betrayal in Georgia. It brings back memories of her ex-husband Damien and how he hurt her. She confronts Noah, and he explains that he did finish the draft, but not the actual book. He says he was giving her time, but Georgia feels like he lied to her and tells him to leave.
Ooh, that's rough.
It's totally understandable, though, given her past experiences. That feeling of betrayal, even if Noah didn't mean any harm, it just opens up old wounds. It really emphasizes how important trust and communication are in any relationship, especially when you're dealing with something as personal as a creative work that's so closely tied to family history.
Absolutely. Transparency is key in any collaboration.
So after all this drama, we get more insight into Scarlett's later life through a letter from her close friend Beatrice. Beatrice was a writer, too, and actually continued Scarlett's literary legacy after she passed away.
That's touching.
And in this letter, Beatrice reveals that Jameson went missing in action. And later, Constance was also killed in a bombing. Imagine losing your husband and then your sister, like that.
That's heartbreaking.
But Scarlett was incredibly strong. She raised her son William on her own, and years later, she found love again with a man named Brian. Beatrice shares a detail that I found really moving. Scarlett's first book was called The Diplomat's Daughter, and she finished building the gazebo that Jameson had always talked about.
Oh, wow.
Beatrice believes that Scarlett finally found peace and was able to move on after a long period of mourning. It's inspiring to see how she was able to find happiness again despite experiencing so much loss. And you can only imagine how much that kind of legacy might influence Georgia.
It makes you think about how the stories of our ancestors can shape our own lives, even if we never met them. Beatrice's letter adds so much to our understanding of Scarlett. It shows her resilience, her ability to overcome adversity and find love again. And those details about the gazebo and the book title, they're like symbols of enduring love and legacy. It's a powerful reminder that even after experiencing great loss, life goes on and new love can blossom.
So Georgia reads this letter from Beatrice, and it's clear that it really affects her. It seems to help her to reconcile with Noah. They even visit Constance's grave together and symbolically bury Jameson's ring. And the story ends with this suggestion that Georgia and Noah are starting their own epic love story. It's a hopeful ending. It feels like Georgia is letting go of the past and opening herself up to the possibility of a new future with Noah. Beatrice's letter really acts as a bridge between the past and the present, showing Georgia that love can endure and evolve across generations.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And the idea of their own epic love story suggests a promising future, built on the foundation of those who came before them.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, there are a few key things that really stand out. The power of love, how it can last through generations, the complexities of family dynamics, the challenges of creative collaboration, and how we can find love and hope even after experiencing loss.
I agree, and I think it's really interesting to compare and contrast Scarlett and Jameson's wartime romance with Georgia and Noah's present-day relationship. Both couples face their own set of obstacles, but those core themes of connection, commitment, and navigating life's uncertainties, they resonate in both stories.
And that brings us to a final thought for you to consider. How does understanding the past, the stories of those who came before us, shape our choices in the present, especially when it comes to love? What does it mean to carry a legacy of both joy and sorrow? We hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought. Thanks for joining us.